Revolution Radio proudly presents, live from the heart of the Blue Ridge, Roanoke, Virginia. It's the Just Bernard Show with host Bernard Alvarez. Join Bernard as he shares topics that reveal the real matrix and empower your human experience, including world liberty, the esoteric, suppressed technologies, spiritual ascension, and human consciousness. Humanity has awakened, and our time has come to realize our full potential. And now, live from the Star City, your host, Bernard Alvarez.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Just Bernard Show here on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. We've got another fantastic show for you today. We've got a great guest joining us in just a few moments, Tere Joyce, and she's got quite a story to share with all of you. I'll tell you a little bit more about Tere in just a few moments, but before we do that, let me welcome our assistant producer and director from the Global Illumination Council. Trevor Knott is joining me live from Winnipeg, Manitoba. Hello, Trevor. How are you today?
Hello, I'm doing great. How about you?
I'm good. I'm very happy to be here, and we've been looking forward to the show, haven't we? Anyway, so I just want to let all of you know that if you are in the chat room, Trevor is in the chat room, and he will be taking your questions for me or Tere Joyce throughout this broadcast. Before we get started, let me go ahead and share a little bit, some really good news that I have to share. For those of you that do not realize, we are celebrating our 5th anniversary at the Global Illumination Council. It's the 5th anniversary of our community website. The project's been around for about 7 years, but our community website is now going to be turning 5 in, on the 29th. It's just around the corner. I can't believe 5 years have gone by this quickly. Just so you know, we are focusing this month here on our radio broadcasts as well as our G.I.C. TV live broadcasts. We're focusing on some of our favorite people from the G.I.C. Last week we had Jeff Harvey, and of course today we're going to have Tere Joyce. And next week we are going to feature Kathy Bilski, who is also a host here on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. So we're looking forward to spending 2 hours with Kathy Bilski as well next week. I just want to take this opportunity to thank every one of you, all of our listeners, all of our members of the Global Illumination Council, all of our fans, our friends, our contributors, our donors, our writers, our bloggers, our administrators. I mean, it really does take a village to do what we do, and I'm just so honored to be a part of this amazing project that has lasted for so many years. And I'll be talking a little bit more about our 5th anniversary celebration and our big upcoming star-studded, celebrity-studded pledge drive coming up in October, but that's not for a few more weeks. So let's go ahead and let me tell you a little bit about my friend Tere Joyce. Tere Joyce happens to be a Global Illumination Council member and has been for many, many years. I remember just scanning through the memberships and looking at all the member profiles, and I just, piqued my interest. Here we had a comedian who was on Last Comic Standing, who was an activist, and I believe we had her on the show probably, about 2 or 3 years ago. But our friendship has grown over the years, and we recently appointed Tere as one of our G.I.C. administrators, so she's now a part of the core team making decisions over at Global Illumination Council. But she is so much more than that. So let me tell you a little bit about Tere Joyce. Tere Joyce was your typical American stand-up comedian whose goals, life, and career existed in the matrix of Hollywood. Then one day, she found herself staring at the barrel of a gun during a federal DEA raid in a California medical marijuana dispensary. The experience was a catalyst for her to examine her government, politics, media, cannabis legalization, and the 1%. Her creative awakening has inspired her to become an art activist, and she is currently a one-woman comedy show. She's currently creating a one-woman comedy show and coinciding web series titled Freedom of Joy. So, without further ado, let's welcome Tere Joyce to the show. Welcome, Tere. How are you?
I am doing really good, and I'm very, very excited to be here today and also be with the Global Illumination Council and to be at this point at the 5-year mark. It's very exciting.
Cool.
And
glad you're here too with us. So thank you for that. Absolutely, Tere. Let's kind of get our guests, give our guests a little bit of a picture of where you were and how you ended up being where you are today. Tell us a little bit about your path from being a comedian to being on Last Comic Standing during reality TV, and then ending up where you are now.
Yeah, well, I was always, when I was growing up, I wanted to be an actress. And so I was really enamored, fascinated with Hollywood. My mom was a big movie buff. So I was exposed to various films. My mom didn't have any censorship. So, I was watching, the Owl and the Pussycat at 4, and things like this. And it ended up that I ended up going and doing stand-up, and it wasn't originally, my idea even then. Although I was familiar with a lot of comedians, I grew up listening to Bill Cosby albums, at the breakfast table. We watched certain shows like Laugh-In. I'm going to be aging myself, but
I remember,
Smothers Brothers, all those kind of things, where I feel that there was somewhat of an influence. I mean, we're all kind of sponges taking an input. And then I moved to Pasadena, went to acting school, and a woman who was an actress invited me to go to the Improv. Which at the time I had never seen live stand-up before. And this was probably I think it was 1984. And, I was looking at Richard Lewis and Jay Leno and, Robert Wool and Marsha Warfield and Stephen Wright and Jerry Seinfeld. These were the acts that were coming through there kind of before they were actually as famous as they became.
Right.
And I thought it was the coolest thing that I ever saw in my life. And anytime any of my family came to visit me, I took them to, the improvisation, and I said, look at this. And then after a while I started watching it, and I thought, if I had an act, I feel like I could do that. I actually had a boyfriend who was Canadian, actually, and he suggested it to me, and I thought it was kind of an odd thing to say, but it stuck in my head. And when I started doing stand-up, that's what worked for me. I started to get noticed. It came easy for me. I became a regular at the Laugh Factory, and I was doing late night sets at 2:00 in the morning. And this is back when, there was Sam Kinison was hitting the scene. He was hot then, and there was Andrew Dice Clay. I literally was at a party at the Chateau Marmont back then, and one of the guys who did the music between the interludes, his name is Dean, said, "Do you know Andrew Dice Clay?" And I said, "No." And he goes, "He's right over there. You have to see him." And and I just remember that glance of looking at him with the white suit and his hair and everything, and then within 6 months he shot up really big. Mm-hmm. So this is kind of the era that I sort of started out in, and I had this vision of the goal was back then was that you did your stand-up, you went on the road, you maybe did a Tonight Show or a David Letterman, or you got Comedy Central or something like that, and a special. And then, it was, you wanted to do sitcoms, and then there was film and television. Of course, there was Disney hovering in the background, grabbing people like Dave Chappelle and, whomever. And felt like that was like, the goal in life. I thought that was like, the thing to do, and my purpose, or I don't know if I thought it was my purpose, but it was the direction that I was going into. And I did end up getting on, finally got a show, which was Last Comic Standing. And that was the year that reality television seemed to explode. I don't remember that era, but it was 2003, and there was, the Joe Millionaire came out, Average Joe, Mr. Personality, Marry My Dad, Oh, But I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. I mean, it was just ridiculous. So much that there was this show called Big in 2003. VH1 did a show called Big in 2003 where they had all these rock artists, and Liza Minnelli came out and all this kind of stuff. And we were invited to like do a red carpet, but it was actually a blue carpet because, only the elite can be on the red carpet. And so, but I didn't know that then. And we, we went through a parade at the Universal Amphitheater of 100 reality so-called television stars. And, the reality television had its own circuit of reality stars that went on these silly little red carpets in LA, and et cetera, et cetera. And I kind of played around with that for a little while. Personally, looking back, I feel that reality television is, part of the programming that is controlling some of our society, or most of it. I mean, there's usually this huge prize that, we're supposed to go to, $100,000 development deal, and we watch. I have chimes going on here. We watch how we peck at each other, or strategize in this sort of Darwinism, mentality for some goal. And I think it shows the worst of people. And then they edit that and they call it reality television. And looking back, I kind of see it as, I was maybe participating. I actually participated in the real boom of what that is. And you know what? I kind of feel a little guilty about it sometimes.
Trust me, we before the awakening, we've all participated in. Before our awakening, we've all participated in one form or another. There's nothing to feel guilty about. It's what you do now. It's what you do now. I have a question for you though. I can't help. I'm mesmerized by your stint on Last Comic Standing. What was that experience like for you? And I believe you ended up as the third finalist.
Well, actually, I went out at number 9.
9, okay.
Which I think is kind of weird, like 9.
That's a good number. That's a good magical number.
Yeah, that's what I say. I didn't know that then, but it was exciting. It was something where it's funny. I know this is going to sound strange, but a friend of mine, I used to work at the Pasadena Playhouse, and I worked in the direct sales department, and a lot of actors worked on the phone selling subscriptions. And one of my coworkers brought me a clipping out of Backstage West, and it was an announcement of Last Comic Standing. And how it was going to be a competition like American Idol, but then it was going to have this big brother aspect where you actually saw the comics live together and communicate together. And in that moment, I just saw myself as being one of the top 10. I just go, that's my show. I'm going to get that. I can't explain it why I felt that way, but I did. And then I was working in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and there was a comedian that was coming through town. One of the opening acts ended up being arrested because, comics are kind of bad that way.
Naughty people.
Right. Because we're kind of criminal. And was replaced by a guy named Sean Anderson, who was moving to LA to live with Ralphie May, who actually came in second place on the show. And he was friends with Jay Moore, who's the actor, that was hosting it at the time, and also was one of the executive producers. And so he said, that Ralphie May's going to be auditioning. They had a private, there was a private audition of like 50 people where people's agents and managers were pushing for the show. And then there was an open call audition that took place at NBC Studios. And that's the one that I went to because I wasn't, I didn't have a manager then. Actually, I am the only person who made it all the way to the house from Los Angeles that was in the real open call category. So we got up at my friend Sean and I auditioned together, and we got up he picked me up at 5 a.m. and got coffee, and we stood in line, and it's interesting how reality television is because they start filming you right away. So they would say, the camera would come on you and they go, how long have you been doing stand up? And you give them your story. Where are you from? Where's your home club at? And then they said, one of the ADs looked at me and she says, okay, you're going to follow the light. They're going to walk a really long walk, and you'll see 2 guys, and they're the casting directors for the Tonight Show. You just go up in front of them, and you just do your routine. They may stop you, not stop you, and they'll let you know right there if you're passed on to the next level. And so I remember the feeling of the doors opening and seeing this white light, and it was a long walk. I felt like I was going to the Wizard of Oz, and and I had spikes in my hair at the time because I was hanging around a lot of goth clubs and stuff and dressing up and being weird. And so I thought, what would it be like to be on stage like that? So I kind of developed a persona surrounding a little bit of the look. And so right away they screamed out, we like your hair. And, I had a conversation with them and felt comfortable and did the routine, and I got passed on to the next level. And it was quite the ride. I have to say that it was all intense in one moment. There were moments where, for example, when we were doing the final competition to go into the house, and we were at the Paris Hotel, and there was 1,600 people in the audience, and you're competing, and you're waiting behind the curtain to come out and step out there and do it. That feeling that I had before going on is something that I've never had since. And, I don't know how to really even compare it to, it was really a skill of keeping my focus and not allowing myself to just completely freak out.
So your public speaking skills were definitely put to the test that night.
Yes, and there was also, you're living in front of a camera all the time too, which oddly enough, I was strangely comfortable with. But it is a different, when you go 2.5 weeks, which was all the filming that was in the house, when you live under a microscope like that, it is weird a little bit. It does kind of sap your energy. Somebody's looking at you when you're sleeping. And when we got into the house, we could not have any of our cell phones. We couldn't watch any television because there's nothing interesting about filming people who are watching TV. And the only TV that we could watch was MSNBC, which now looking back, I find that to be a little weird.
That's funny. That's very funny. And let me just ask you, I don't remember the series. Quite honestly, I don't remember what I was doing in the early thousands. I think I was still stoned off more stoned than I am now. No, but let me ask you, what were any besides yourself? Did anybody else really come out of it? A name that we might recognize that came out of that particular series?
Well, I think one of the biggest people that came out of Last Comic Standing, and he did not make it to the house that year, but he was on the show.
Wow. And
he was actually a friend of mine that I had known quite a few years beforehand, was Ant, which is the gay comedian.
Mm-hmm, I remember him.
He ended up doing 3 seasons. They brought him back for the second year, and he re-auditioned and then made it to the house. And then we had a 3rd season where it was first season against second season, and that really launched him. Then the Logo channel came about, and then he hosted Celebrity Fit Club, and he was really really hot there from it for a while. Ralphie May, who came in second, I feel it has had a really good career from it. There's Gabriel Iglesias, although he ended up getting I think he was on the fourth or fifth season. He ended up getting actually let go because he was on his BlackBerry during the show texting his girlfriend, and so he got in trouble and got dismissed because it was in the contract. But his career has been quite good as well. So, but nobody got a development deal. Nobody got what the show actually really promised them.
Right.
But they did get $100,000 if you were the winner.
Wow. Well, that's very helpful. However, it's funny. I happen to be. I'm not a fan of television. I don't really watch television. I only watch certain things on Hulu. And the only reality I really watch, or reality shows I watch, are revolve around Gordon Ramsay. I love to cook. And I think Gordon is funny. I'm sure he's a jerk in real life. Like, well, maybe he's not. I don't know. I don't know him, but I also hear the same things where people that win all these like Gordon Ramsay shows, they never get the job at the restaurant. They never get the chef job, or they get the money, but they don't get the job. So I feel that might be a common thing in some of these reality shows.
Yeah, I feel that it is, and looking now that I'm really glad. I mean, there was a point where like I felt passed over. Not that it really bothered me. I mean, a lot of things that I got from agents was, well, I think I was like too counterculture, and my hair, and we don't know what to do with her, and it seemed like most of the parts that they wanted to put women into were like the divorced mom or somebody's mom, or like these stereotypical female roles that I feel that I really didn't fall into, and so I don't know. It seemed like I got kind of pulled out of it, or the possibility of what that direction was leading to. But again, I never think that those things are accidents, because now I look at Hollywood, and of course, like I'm continuously examining things like Disney, and Disney being a military industrial complex, and Hollywood, and now I know that Hollywood is a Druid word, and it means it's the sorcerer's wand,
Right.
from so I had no idea that. So now like these other things are coming into focus for me, and I'm beginning to realize what the bigger picture is, and I've actually come to a point, because I've been working on my own media, with like doing Hollywood Hempress Hour, which is for legalization of marijuana, and my own show now with Freedom of Joyce that I'm launching. The direction that I've been going to creatively on the internet, I've had some people that go, oh, well, we want you to fit in this box because we want to take you from the internet and sell you into television.
Yeah,
and I'm
yeah.
like, well, you know what? I don't really feel like being there right now, and I don't think that they're going to like hire me for what I'm saying, because I'm almost anti them at this point. I'm not saying it's all bad and there's no good things that come out creatively through mainstream media, but I feel that most of the movies and most of the things that are happening right now are simply to program how we think, feel, buy, and what our reality is. And it's kind of like going to work for Walmart.
Right.
It's like you're selling part of your soul of what that is. So I would have chosen, or what my goal is, to counter media that and give entertainment or some truth with what I'm talking about, so that you're I want the alternative of it, and I don't have to be there.
Right.
Not with the internet.
That's a wonderful part about the internet. Actually, we're coming up on a break right now, but when we return, we're going to be talking to Tere about that one moment that changed her perception and perspective of why she feels like this. We'll be right back.
And now, back to your host, Bernard Alvarez.
Welcome back to the Just Bernard Show here on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. We are spending the broadcast with our good friend and wonderful comedian and hemp activist, Tere Joyce is here with us. Before the break, we discussed a little bit about her experiences on Last Comic Standing, reality TV, and the whole Hollywood Matrix part of her career. And Terry, by the way, thank you for sharing so much. I'm sitting here. I happened to look up the Wikipedia page for Last Comic Standing, and
Yeah.
you're on it, of course. But
I
I
made
just was,
Wikipedia.
I recognized maybe two other names besides you, so you're right. Not many of them really got the big deals that they were promised.
No. I mean, I would say still though, it hasn't done my career any damage.
Not
I
at all,
mean, it's
absolutely.
nice branding. It helps on a resume. It helps to get, it helped me headline. Because I wasn't a headliner yet. It still gets me work.
Right.
In terms of performances or stage work.
Absolutely.
But what the show promises, no, no one really had, that kind of a launch. It wasn't like
Became Seinfeld.
right. Nobody got Seinfeld.
But anyway, and you were talking about, and I happen to agree with you that so many of us in the activist movement, the truth movement, the consciousness movement, we're so weary and we're very black and white when it comes to working with whether it be a Hollywood producer or working with a big name or something like that. But it is and does give the opportunity to create a way to get yourself out there, even if it's just for the beginning of your career or whatnot. I mean, I look at Russell Brand right now and what he's doing, and
I love what he's
getting
doing.
away with it.
Oh, I love it. He's my new hero.
Yeah, absolutely. As a comedian, I can see why. I mean,
I'm like, oh, he's genius at it, and I just he's going for it. He doesn't care.
Yep.
And he's smart about it.
Absolutely. I mean, he's had Laura Eisenhower on his show, for goodness sake. He's gotten away with so many controversial people and bringing them to the public's eye, which is very important to get the information out there. And I think that's what I love about your form of comedy, and which is, if I may, I hope this would be a compliment to say that the likes of like George Carlin or Richard Pryor, the folks that are out there talking about social issues.
Oh, thank you. That's what that's what I've been wanting to be.
Yeah. Again, Lee Camp is another one that's out there doing what you're doing. And I think it's so important. And I got to share with you, and I'll share. This is the first time I might have shared this in public, that I was actually considering, when I first started G.I.C., I had been asked to do comedy because everyone thought I was so funny. And I was asked, they're like, well, why don't you bring your activism to the comedy stage? So I was tempted. But
why not?
maybe today's relaxed atmosphere broadcast might bring something to that. But anyway,
I think it's a form of communication. It makes me think of, I don't know if anybody knows out there. There was a man named Lord Buckley, who Lenny Bruce was a fan of, and actually I know his daughter Lori Buckley. She's a huge supporter of hemp and marijuana, and so was Lord Buckley. She said that her father, it was during the time where, the beatnik kind of speaking kind of stuff was going on with Jack Kerouac and everything. And she said that her mother said, you have something to say, then say it. So he chose that particular format to express himself in, which I find it interesting that somebody would think about, and it was comedic or, kind of that sort of era, that he could have chosen another way of expression.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, and I think what's so lovely about doing what you do and presenting it as a comedy show is that you can talk about really controversial topics. You can say things that most people would be totally offended by and still get away with it because it kind of gives it that buffer of, well, it's really comedy, even though you're like saying, the president is a reptilian,
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the whole thing of the Joker, I mean, part of that is what it is. at the same time, though, I have offended people. Like, they've gotten up and walked out.
Well, you wouldn't be
So,
a good comedian if you didn't piss a few people off.
yeah, you know, like really, that kind of happened in Salt Lake City recently.
Oh, well, we're definitely going to talk about that in a few minutes. But
Okay.
before we do that, so you were doing Last Comic Standing, you were doing comedy clubs, you were living you were walking the Hollywood comedian path,
Yeah.
and then one day the federal government put a gun to your face. Tell
Right.
us, tell us a
well,
little bit about what happened there and how that kind of changed your perspective on how you approached your comedy.
Well, there were some things that came in between there.
Oh, okay. Well, please share with us.
Yeah. What had happened was, and again, you know, I was not a person that grew up, like, I wasn't the stoner chick in high school. Like, I was, you know, the drama science geek, you know, person. And, you know, I kind of had, I wouldn't say a religious upbringing, but there were some religious influences, you know, either through my classmates or somewhat of what I had attended to. So there was this whole thing of, you know, the bad kids smoke weed. You know, those are they were the ones who had their hair a little bit farther down their collar, you know, because, you know, there was a hair code and everything. But when I started to work in the Northwest or as a comedian, an actress or whatever, you know, of course, you move to LA, you get exposed to marijuana or, you know, different drugs even. But, you know, it just seemed like most of the time, like when we worked on the road as comics, we would smoke weed, maybe we stayed in an apartment together that they called the condo, which was never a condo. And it just seemed like kind of a rite of passage. It was almost sort of tribal that we did together once in a while. And I thought, oh, well, you know, and then it just sort of stayed there for me. Like, when I go on the road, I'm going to smoke some weed. When I go back, I'm not. Well, up here in the Oregon Northwest area, and by the way, I live in Washington now where marijuana is legal and gay marriage. I, you know, was smoking more and, you know, kind of it was coming into my life a little bit more, I noticed. And then a friend of mine approached me and said, would you like to do a marijuana themed show? And at first I wanted to, no, you know, it's being done in different places and, you know, and let's do sex, drugs, and rock and roll, make it this sort of umbrella where we can include it, but it doesn't have to be all about it. But because of the fact that the topic was so hot in California at that time, it was around 2007. It just seemed like that's where we were leading to. We got invited to, you know, perform at Bruce Margolin's party, which, you know, yearly annual party. And he was like a major attorney for, you know, cannabis legalization. Nice. And then, you know, we were doing a show in the smaller room at the Ice House Comedy Club, which usually is referred to being as the amateur room because, you know, people would go, are you in the big room or the little room? And I go, no, we're in the little room. But one day there was like a reporter from the Star News wanting to talk about the fact that we were doing a marijuana themed show at the Ice House. And she thought it was provocative because Pasadena had shut down their dispensaries in Pasadena. And so, you know, then the article comes out and it says, you know, Ice House Comedy Club advocates legal pot. And I'm like, oh, God, I'm in trouble. And so I get called on the office by the owner and I need to check out your show. And all of a sudden I'm being examined. And this was like around MySpace time. So I started to like just, you know, I was just stirring the pot. I thought, oh, we're being discriminated against. Please come out and support our show. We need to have a good show, blah, 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 blah. And, you know, people showed up and, you know, there was like this kind of buzz that was starting to happen surrounding this like provocative, like marijuana show. And there were some people that wanted to produce it and get attached to it. And there was like a little bit of a momentum happening. And a friend of mine said, do you want to do it in Portland, Oregon? And I said, sure, I'd love to do it in Portland, Oregon. So we started to produce it at the Baghdad Theater on 420. There was going to be a couple of hosts that already were doing a marijuana themed show from a classic rock station that was, you know, very prominent in the Portland, Oregon area. And we just combined them to our show. And we were hoping to go on the radio and publicize it. But no, because the mainstream media is never going to want to talk about marijuana because they're against that agenda. So KUFO radio and CBS radio wouldn't allow their hosts to be on the show because they found the subject matter to be offensive and not in line with the radio station.
Oh, Lord.
So this caused like a lot of pressure between the comedy community. There was like lots of fights. I mean, in the chat, I was like maybe losing one booker from another room that I was doing, like was threatening to cancel our show. And I mean, it just, and the, but this all came about because I contacted the papers. I went to the papers and I said to like the Willamette Weekly and different people like that, I said, look, why is this offensive? Because Oregon was the first state to decriminalize marijuana in 1973, and it's a benefit for Oregon NORML. Well, an article ran in the Willamette Weekly that caused a little bit of a rift between all of us. And it just kind of went crazy. And then I contacted the Pasadena Weekly because all of the weeklies were connected together, and they wanted to do a sister article about what was happening in Portland, Oregon surrounding the dope show. And the Pasadena Weekly had done some articles on me being on Last Comic Standing, and I had lived for a long – I was kind of like a hometown girl, even though it's not really my hometown, but I lived there for a really long time. And so I had a connection, and the editor was pro-marijuana legalization. So the day I was to do that article, and this is all happening in about a 2.5 week span, the day I was to do the article, we were also doing a 420 show on National Lampoon Radio, and I didn't have a car at the time, so I asked a friend of mine to give me a ride. And he worked for a doctor who does medical marijuana recommendations. And his office, or her office, was in the same building as the dispensary. So we ran out of time, and I had to go to work with him. And it was at that moment that the dispensary was raided. And everybody from the dispensary ran into our room, and so which was the doctor's office, because, you really couldn't tell which room was which, really. And we were all held at gunpoint by the DEA. And handcuffed and interrogated. And so, when that happened, I literally almost lost it. I mean, I did not do well in front of the guns. I started to cry. I screamed out, I was just a comedian. I just was really, I was afraid that there was going to be an accidental shooting and someone was going to be shot. I wasn't really afraid of being arrested. I was really afraid of being shot.
Oh, right.
And when when I was finally handcuffed and I sort of calmed down for a second, and I started to in that moment, I was taking an assessment, and I was like, oh my God, what's going on with my life? Because this was all happening all at once. And it was it had only been 2 weeks, or it had only been a week since the controversy had started with the papers and everything in Portland, and all that drama was going on. And then there was this raid happening, and I had this feeling as if my soul, I was like, wait a second, none of this is an accident. And I was like, I'm supposed to see this. And I felt like part of me was asking, going, how did it, I've been asleep. How did it get this bad? Things are really bad right now. And it was almost I almost also felt a sense of shame. Oh my God, it was like I was being jerked out of into another type of awareness. And then when I was released, I mean, none of us were really, nobody was arrested. Basically, what it was is that the feds were just kind of coming in and really kind of being bullies, in my opinion, and saying, you know what, you may think you have your state rights and you might think you voted for this, but, we are the federal government and we don't approve of this and we still find this illegal. And even if we can't arrest you right now, we're going to scare the crap out of you and take away your money and your weed, and also your big screen TVs are going to go with us.
Yep.
It was very Viking pirate-like.
Kind of oh geez, what I'm thinking of, I can't remember, but yeah, the conqueror mentality or something.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like you guys are just a bunch of bullies. And when I was out, of course, at the end of the day, I don't know how I did this, but I was shaking their hand and joking with them, and I go, thanks for giving me 30 minutes it's a new material. And then, we were like pals for some weird reason. I don't know how that happened really. And I'm like, hey, see you guys later. Good luck to you. I called the paper up and I say, hey, I said, I was just in a raid right now. And they go, get here right now immediately. And it was really weird. I walked into the offices of the Pasadena Weekly. It was almost like people stepped up from their desks, and I'm like, this is interesting. And the editor came out and started talking to me, and we went out, and he took us to like this place called the 35er, which is people call it the 30 Diver, but it's a dive bar, and it's one of the oldest bars in Old Town Pasadena. And there were young journalists and reporters, and we all sat around and had some beer. And we started to tell the story, and he said, I want this to be a cover story. So then, on April 19th, the day before our show, and I'm up here in the Northwest, the paper comes out, and, I'm on the cover with the American flag behind me, and I'm blowing marijuana smoke and the word barloads of justice and how a DEA raid turned me to a missionary for medical marijuana. So I had to like step back and go, how the hell did this happen? And how did I go from point A to point B?
In one day.
In one day, practically. And then I had some pot brownies after the show, which were highly, highly induced. And I mean, they had like, I think 1/8 of a gram in each one, and I didn't know it. And I actually I call a shamanic vision. Right. And I heard voices, and I think I heard my guides, and I saw a blueprint of, I go, no, this was not an accident. Like basically everything that's happened right now has led me to this point, and this is actually part of my incarnation. And I saw how the plant was very much a part of the health and the stability of the entire planet.
Yeah, and it could do so much for all of us, absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, Tere, I don't mean to take away from the profundity of what you're sharing, but I have to jump in and say there's one part. I watched your clip, one of your clips, a couple days ago, describing this particular raid, and the water story just cracked me up.
Oh, thank you.
So what happened? What happened? You're thirsty, and everyone's scared to death. And can you tell us?
Yeah, well, this really happened. I mean, it was like we were eventually, all put into this room. We were all sitting in chairs, like in a half circle, and like the DEA is looking at us, and we're looking at them, and all of a sudden somebody goes, "I want a drink of water," and the DEA says, well, if we give you water, we have to give everyone else in here water. And then somebody else goes, yeah, I want some water. And they were like, yeah, we want water. We want water. We want it filtered too. And,
non-fluoridated.
Yeah, no fluoride. I mean, it was funny. It was like being in kindergarten. It was like all of a sudden, like we were in kindergarten. I want some water. The teacher, like, well, if I give you a peanut, everybody else here has to have a peanut. It was like this whole mentality going on, and.
It's a whole like police state, like we're in control. No, if we give you water, everyone must have water. Right.
It's like, don't tell me are we communism? Is this a democracy? I don't know. It was really, it definitely had that kind of feeling to it. And we were, yelling things at them like, why don't you arrest the tweakers and the heroin addicts? What are you bothering us for? And, then they would do the whole, reefer madness, that stance, like, because marijuana is against the law. And it was like, I wanted to laugh at them. And I wanted to laugh. It was funny too how, because like, and again, like that was true. When they wanted to take my mugshot, I was smiling, and they were like, this is a serious photo. And I was like, oh, okay. And then, they would go, do you have any aliases? And I go, well, my alias is Tere Joyce, but you can find me on Facebook. And they're like, we don't do Facebook. And I'm like, the hell you don't.
Yeah, right. They own Facebook practically.
You're totally on Facebook.
Oh my gosh. So tell me what happened. Okay. So here we have this really profound and I would say very emotionally charged event. You're getting raided. Then you do the story. What happened afterward? How did did you end up doing the show afterward?
Well, we did do the show. We did do the show in Portland. We also had a guy named Johnny Fairplay who was who because of the things that I was posting on MySpace at the time, wanted to be part of it. He was like the really bad villain on Survivor. He was the guy who lied about his grandmother being dying to get farther on the show. He has no soul, really, but. He came in and did the show, and so that was kind of interesting in Portland. And unfortunately, at the time, it caused it was called the Dope Show, and it caused it to fall apart.
Oh.
There was the stress of it, and I guess like the spotlight of the paper and all that kind of stuff kind of parted ways with my partner that I was doing the show on. We are now friends. And have both done our own media and come back together again and perform together and done stuff together since.
Oh, good.
But that particular show ended for me anyway. I ended up it affected me a lot, and it took me at least almost 2 years before I can make that routine funny because I'm so upset about it. It affected me in the sense that I thought, like, well, I voted for this. How could you? I mean, why is the federal government not paying attention to our state rights? And I was not a political person at the time, and
You know what, Terry? We got to take a break, and we're going to continue talking about everything that changed when we return. We'll be right back.
And now, back to your host, Bernard Alvarez.
Welcome back to the Just Bernard Show here on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. We are speaking with Tere Joyce, comedian, hemp activist, and now a G.I.C. administrator for the Global Illumination Council. Now, before we went on the break, Tere, you were telling us, you were sharing with us what had happened with the DEA raid and how this really affected your paradigm and how you looked at the world. Tell me a little bit, or tell us a little bit, some examples of what changed in the way that you perceive the government, media, magazines, television, and actually your dream of being a Hollywood starlet, for lack of a better term. How did it all change?
Well, I started to, first I was just looking at the discrimination that was surrounding cannabis. And I worked, did a lot of activism. I'm on the board of directors of the Patient Advocacy Network, which protects it's a 501c3 that protects patients' rights. And I've been working with a woman named G.I.C for a long time on different projects and fundraisers. And, I started to do my own media and, and doing more political topical shows on the radio with other comedians and things like this. And so I started to expand into, being asked to study things and then have certain topics and have an opinion on those certain topics. And as I started to do that, I started to get my own awareness of what might be happening as well. I had a comedian that influenced me quite a bit. His name is Rick Overton, and he kind of took me under his wing, and he is a entertainer who is aware of a lot of what's going on, and I started to realize or get the feeling that my government wasn't really working for us anymore, or that there was something wrong. It hasn't been until after, because I took the Obama Kool-Aid. I was really looking right and left a lot still around that time, but around 2009 I started to get a feeling that maybe the world wasn't as we saw it, that there might be an extraterrestrial existence, and that some of that might have an influence on a shadow government. And when I started to think about the possibility of that, at first I was very secretive about it, that I couldn't get enough media on the internet or enough information as to what that possibility might be. And, that's when I was kind of looking around YouTube and I found one of your YouTube videos. And when I saw your video, it was the Lightworker Magical series. And I was also interested in, I became interested in alchemy or magic or, pagan or witchcraft or, things where, I wasn't opposed to it. I always had a curiosity to it, but I was kind of wondering, starseed. I was having an awakening of realizing that maybe I was not originally, like, I might know other planets or other societies, worlds, just in my own self. My friend actually, one time it was my birthday, and I said, well, I feel like I've known you another life, and he says, yes, we've even been extraterrestrial before, and I thought
nice.
that was. And it didn't shock me that he said it, but it was right around that time that I started to become, it was sort of a catalyst for me to become curious as to what was really happening. And, so when I saw your video, I was like, God, I feel like you feel like someone that I would be friends with, like I could see us like bar hopping in the night.
Oh yeah, we still can.
And I was like, I know that, and there was something that you said, because like a lot of times when you look for these kind of circles or communities, cannabis gets criticized.
Always.
If you do use it, or the legalization of it, it still has this stigma of it's bad, or it's going to affect your ascension, or it's going to affect these things. And I'm not saying that it may not. I mean, if you're using it in an abusive way, when you have a crutch, that is obviously part of you. It's going to affect your spiritual and your physical and personal growth, but these plants are healing, and they have been used, as I've understood since the beginning of time, in terms of like awakening and awareness. I think DMT, ayahuasca, it's all mushrooms. They're all part of the mystery religions, and the shamans have been using it for ages, but they just don't want the regular population to know this, because there's still an element of control that someone wants to have the insight and the other people don't get to have the insight. Therefore, I know what's going to happen and you don't, and that way I can control the outcomes. And I think we all know that.
Yep.
But it was that realization that I started to find over the past few years. And then I've gone into really wondering what was happening in Hollywood. I found Disney seemed to always come up for me all the time. It seemed like friends of mine would say in Hollywood, well, I really want to be on your show, Tere, but I can't, because if I do, I'm not going to get those Disney parts. And I'm thinking, really? And then I started to look into, my friend wanted to have a costume of a pot fairy made, and there was a costumer that was going to work with her, but when she had to decline it because she worked for Disney, and Disney decided that they wouldn't allow her on her off time create a pot fairy costume because she was with Disney. And I'm like, what is it between Disney and marijuana legalization? And then of course, I've like the lid is blown off on that whole subject matter for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Disney is not necessarily what Walt intended at this point.
Yeah. No, it's not. And then I got curious about MK Ultra and MK Ultra in Hollywood. Just kind of watching. First, when you started to read about the Illuminati and you start to become aware of what's going on there, and then I'm thinking, oh, is it real? Is it not real? You don't know until somehow something directly kind of touches you a little bit. And there was a show that I was working on, and there was a girl that was part of the cast, and she had worked on Batman of all movies, which I think also, in my opinion, I'm suspicious that it plays a role in mind conditioning.
Right.
And so she was the script supervisor for the Batman movies. And she had this necklace on that one of the other girls in the cast goes, "That's Illuminati," and she goes, "Oh yeah, I go to their parties here in Hollywood," and I go, I go to their meetings," and I go, "You go to Illuminati meetings?" And she goes, "Yeah, they help you with your career and stuff like that."
Oh my God.
And I was just like, "Oh my God, yeah."
Yeah,
And oddly,
I'm sorry. I just wanted to jump in because before I lost track, you were talking about MK Ultra in Hollywood.
yeah.
And recently, another comedian has come on the bandwagon to talk about MK Ultra in Hollywood, and that's Roseanne Barr.
Yeah,
And,
that was the woman. Yeah.
and anyway, she's actually spoken about it with our guest next week, Kathy Bilski, on a video. but apparently, Kathy and Roseanne are old friends. But apparently, Roseanne believes I don't know if she said she was a victim of it or that she just seen it everywhere. But it's so. What did you get out of what she was sharing?
Well, first of all, I was so happy that she did share it, because for me, it validated the existence of it, that somebody who like Roseanne would come out and say, "Hey, this actually really exists in Hollywood," and so she's a big name. I mean, she's quite controversial. I mean, I think in some ways, but she's definitely a woman that it appears that she speaks her mind. I met her briefly a little bit. I was at a party and I talked to her a little bit and there was a group of people kind of hanging out and talking and I really I feel that she's honest. I mean, she's on the level. I mean, she's gonna fight the system, or she's gonna call the truth out, and I applaud her for that. I mean, some people don't want to come out and say that these kind of things exist because they don't want to stop working, or because they are actually part of they are under mind control.
Exactly, and also if you just to go back and talk about a little bit what you talked about the costume designer. I mean, when you are signing a contract with these big companies, you have no control. They own you, literally. And it's very disconcerting where you have to be concerned what you do in your private life, or even what you're feeling an affinity for. They disconnect that energy for something you might have an affinity for, like legalizing marijuana.
Yes. Well, there was also and I've also become friends with somebody, or as we actually met. Ironically, I always think that there's certain vortex points where you meet people, and we actually met in Portland, like around maybe 2005, and then reconnected in Los Angeles. He's a comedian that has worked around the UK and things like this, and he had a development deal with Disney when he was young. I mean, young, and he was on like a bill with Dave Chappelle and like their new talent. It was during that time. Canadian guy.
Uh-huh.
And he, basically he got booted out because he couldn't be programmed by them. He said that they wanted to control every aspect of his life, and he was like young and rebellious and, kind of got, he was supposed to be George of the Jungle, but it went to Brendan Fraser instead. Yeah, that was going to be his, he was originally cast as that. And there was one night where, somebody said, we were all hanging out with some friends, and I said, oh, well, yeah, Vince had a, development deal, but he couldn't be programmed by Disney. And he actually said to me, he said, thank you for saying that, because that is what happened. And he's interesting, a guy. He actually, his father, was somehow connected to the Illuminati. And we went to he had I guess it's the Hano, it's the Hawaiian forgiveness ceremony. He went through that and had some artifacts that he blessed that were pretty dark. He had like a ring that was connected to the Nazi Germany whatever was going on there. And he also had this strange things. He showed them to me, and it goes, here they are, Tere, I bless them because I need to forgive my ancestry. And
Oh,
I
wow.
was just like, wow.
So he broke the cycle of abuse, so to speak.
Yes. Yeah.
And speaking of that, Terry, you just went, and I'm going to switch gears a little bit here, but you just were doing, if I'm not mistaken, you were doing a documentary in Utah.
Yes.
And I'm sure that kind of opened up some eyes. It's opened up your eyes even more to the connection to to Freemasonry and the Mormons and whatnot that goes on there. Can you tell us what was this Utah experience for you? And first of all, what were you doing, and how did it affect you?
Well, that's interesting. It did affect me, and it was I wasn't expecting to have to have that realization. A friend of mine called me up and he said, "Hey, do you want to do this documentary in Salt Lake City, Utah? And then I'll add a show." And it's just somebody who I do a lot of he books a lot of venues and stuff like that around here, and so I said, "Yeah, I'm." It's fine, and we had an RV donated to us, so we drove up in an RV. Being that you can't, because I was going with a bunch of people who like to smoke weed and drink alcohol basically, and we're like, we need to have our own private place to do this, because we're not sure. And I'm like, okay, and it was a family kind of event, because we were his cousin was had Unibrow Comics, and he was a film student, ironically though connected to the military, had fought in 2 different military wars, and was suffering from some post-traumatic stress disorder from it as well. So I also got to examine a really strong military connection in that town as well. I've never seen a state be so influenced by a religion before, and it seems to permeate everywhere. They even get, there's a place called Deseret News or Deseret Products. They have their own products, their own ketchup, their own logos. They get, if you're Mormon, you have your milk delivered to your house. It almost feels like it went back to being like 1950. So this town, and I don't want to sound strange, but when you talk to people or you see things or you look around, it feels almost like it's been socially engineered.
I'm sure it has.
Yeah, and it's like, and I've traveled around. I mean, I've been to most of the states in the United States. I haven't spent a whole lot of time on the East Coast, but I've been all through the Midwest, all through the Northwest, Albuquerque, Southwest, all that area. I've never had such a weird feeling or observation or seeing such control other than in Utah. And when I first, because we were, the first day we were getting ready to leave, I got my wig on and everything, and I'm ready to hit the convention center. And it was really hot that day. And we step out of the RV and we're in the parking lot. And I look to my left, and there is the Mormon church with the little gold guy on top of it. Mm-hmm. And I look straight over to the side, and I see a pyramid on top of a building. And I went, oh, wow. That's when I finally had the realization. And then I was going to the Comic-Con, which also I feel is part of, the mind conditioning. Mm-hmm. And so I'm like, wow, I'm walking into it right now. And I kind of got a little afraid for a moment.
You were walking into the belly of the beast.
Yeah, and so so we walked into the convention, and I observed. It's interesting. Comic-Con's interesting because I find it fascinating that people dress up in characters, or they gravitate towards a storyline, or they want to embody the qualities of what that is. And what was frightening to me, and I don't know if people see it from this perspective, or if I say it to certain people, they go, oh, just loosen up, just don't be like that. But to see people dressed up in these sort of like military, robotic looking, characters, reminds me of like, the super soldiers and like, all that kind of stuff that's actually really, maybe taking place. Because I've been listening to Project Camelot, interview some super soldiers, or even Roxy Lopez interview Max Spears about how some of these, people are genetically and robotically conditioned to become these super soldiers for the agenda. So to see people walking around in these comic characters, I'm like, you're not really too far off the truth here about what might really be taking place. There were some people that dressed up in, and I thought this was really disturbing, their outfits looked Nazi-like. And they had like one guy had like, I don't know what character he was, but he was wearing the like that eyes wide shut weird mask with the long nose coming out of it, and this like long jacket that looked like a Nazi jacket. And I'm like, what character are you? Like, who are you? Who's underneath that mask, and why are you choosing to walk around like that? Don't you not know that that's part of the costuming of something that wasn't really very good? And so I found that to be an interesting subject.
You're bringing up a very interesting subject, because I mean, so many people, especially involved in the consciousness movement or the truth movement, are there's a lot of geeks, for lack of a better term. People are into Star Trek, Doctor Who, Star Wars, all that stuff. And I can't help but wonder, I was having a chat on Facebook about a month ago with someone, how they're the Sith, him and his friends are the Sith. I'm like, why would you align with the Sith? Wouldn't you want to be a Jedi? And again, I can see, don't get me wrong, I'm sure there is an element of youthful ignorance involved in some of this. But on the other hand, as someone, let's say an awakened person, if I would love to go to a Comic-Con. I don't know if I would dress up, but I would love to go to a Comic-Con just to see and mingle with the people. But if I were to dress up, I would want to be like a Jedi or something, like Obi-Wan Kenobi, a part of the light, a part of the Force. But I can't help but wonder, like you said, is it a part of the programming? And, like many people, like everything has a subtle vibration to it. And unfortunately, I believe that a lot of these disenfranchised youth who are not, who don't have friends, who are behind their computer living in their mom's basement, they align with these darker characters because it gives them a feeling of power. A power that they don't have in their 3D life, unfortunately. But I can see where that could be manipulated and taken advantage of by the powers that be. Absolutely.
Well, and another thing too is there's also, I feel that there's a social conditioning surrounding just our army or military, whatever, be all that you can be.
Yes,
and,
exactly.
There's heroic aspect to being like that as well, because you're protecting your country, but at the same time, I feel that there's a feeling of hope. I mean, there are some good, there are also great heroic characters in comic books. There are, there is, the awareness of other planets and time traveling and good overcoming evil, and a hope for a better world, or an intergalactic society that you wish you could belong to. So there's I don't think it's like, I don't like to think that it's all bad. Either. There was, what I found fascinating, of course, what I was gravitated towards were the actual alien booths, or there was the paranormal group of people that are associated with some of the paranormal shows, like Ghost Hunters and Grimm, and there I did get to have a psychic reading from one of the mediums there, and that was really I would say probably my highlight of my experience.
Cool. Very
for
cool.
Me personally.
I love, and I love that about these conventions, that now they're bringing in the paranormal. That is, paranormal researchers that are using scientific methods. So it's a wonderful thing to see that blend of science or paranormal science brought into this, where it was considered just entertainment at one point. But I do relate to what you're saying as far as this idea of the military. And when you were mentioning the costume, that movie Equilibrium popped into my head. And I don't know if you've seen it, and I don't know if anybody listening has seen it, but it is a horrible. Well, it's a great movie, but it's that, the whole dystopia of our future that we're headed into, very much headed into at this time, and it does have a very cold, Nazi-esque, military, fascist vibe, and I think that's the bottom line. It's the vibe. What is the vibe that is created through these characters, and then dressing up in such characters is what I would think about. As a metaphysician, what's the underlying energy behind this?
Yeah, I haven't seen that movie yet. I need to check it out, because I'm curious about like certain films and what the messages in the underlying messages of the films that are happening. When you start to become aware, I think we start to become awakened, and you start to see things. And it's like all of a sudden you can see you can see something that you had not seen before. So now I like to look at movies and go, what is going on here, and where is this going to? I've always felt something weird lately about the Batman shootings. Or the Batman influence. Especially like what happened in Colorado.
Yeah.
I'm like, and the Joker character is, I saw a couple people dressed up like the Joker, and I was like, really? Like, you're going to go out like that? I mean, it's almost like to me, if you identify with the Joker, I just find it sort of, specifically that particular Joker that, the one actor played.
Heath Ledger, yeah.
Yes.
Who mysteriously dies, of course, in a hotel room.
Yes. Yeah. Which is, yeah. And so, I did hear and read, I think all of us have read that he had to take he was on the medications that he was taking because he had a difficult time playing that part.
Yeah, it really affected him, exactly.
Yeah, of the evil.
It just, and again, we're digging into so many different rabbit holes right now, and the rabbit holes just get deeper and deeper no matter where you look. And I think that's kind of what you're trying to tell us with this aspect of our discussion, is that after going through what you went through, after seeing what you saw, all of a sudden now the rabbit holes have opened, and anywhere you look, you're starting to see the different layers and the depth of how deep these rabbit holes go.
Yeah. I do, and again, it's nice to talk about it here because I talk about it with friends that I have some friends that I have in my life, most people friends, and they're like, you're sounding like a conspiracy theorist. You're sounding
paranoid.
And I go, but don't you see it? The emperor isn't wearing any clothes. It's like, I can't not think that it's not happening. To think that Hollywood isn't manipulating us or using some of this for, or maybe using some of these films for mind conditioning. Of course they are. Why would somebody shoot somebody dressed up like that character? Did they just unobtrusively, they just decided to identify themselves and so did that because they were crazy? I question that. I question why that would have happened. One of the other things that happened while we were there, beyond just being at the Comic-Con, well, let me mention this about the Comic-Con. I just want to throw this out here before there's a whole other aspect about the architecture in Salt Lake City that shows Egyptian, and Babylonian pictures, as well as Freemason symbolism in their structures and in the walls of the Mormon Church and everything. So
Wow.
there's definitely a strong influence that way. And we just shot a video on my Freedom of Joyce channel with my friends that did the show, and all of us on that trip are pretty awakened as to what is happening around. So all of us together observed everything together in terms of the Freemason influence, as well as the church and the companies that were surrounding it. We took photos, and you could take the photo of a bumper sticker of somebody's car, and they had the Freemason symbol on it. with that little, I guess, what is that? That little compass thing that's, inverted.
Yes.
Yeah, that was on on a bumper sticker, on someone's car. I've never seen that before. I mean,
Oh, it's all over Virginia, honey. It's all over Virginia. Anyway, Terry, I hate to cut you off, but we need to go ahead and take another short break. When
sure.
we return, we're going to continue speaking with Terry Joyce and on her profound awakening and her membership of the G.I.C. We'll be right back.
And now, back to your host, Bernard Alvarez.
Welcome back to the Just Bernard Show here on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. We are speaking with Tere Joyce, and we have been having a great conversation and discussion. Before we bring Tere back on the show, I just wanted to remind our listeners that next week we are going to be continuing our G.I.C. Global Illumination Council 5th anniversary lineup with our good friend Kathy Bilski. She'll be joining us for the entire broadcast. Kathy is also a host here on Revolution Radio and is also a member of the Global Illumination Council, and we look forward to speaking with her for those 2 hours next week. As well, we have lots of events coming up. You can learn more about me. You can learn more about Global Illumination Council at thegic.org. With that being said, let's bring Tere back on the show. Hi, Tere. Welcome back.
Hello.
And I just wanted to, first of all, I just want to say that I've watched many of your stand-up clips. I wish I could see you live. I haven't had the opportunity to see you live. But
I'll have to come to Virginia.
We need to book you here in Virginia. Absolutely.
Yes.
Actually, tell your agent 202 Market. That's where the comedians seem to be coming.
Okay. 202 Market.
202 Market in Roanoke, Virginia, and you'll probably get a great audience there. However, let me just say, when I watch you, first of all, yes, I laugh. I love the way that you present and the way that just your presence on stage is perfect. You're funny, you're controversial, and you get the point across with giving us a chuckle, and that's the beauty of your style of comedy. So thank you for taking that the activist aspect of comedy to the next level.
Well, thank you. I started to think, when I realized that things were happening in the world and I wanted to be of service to it, I did a lot of different things. And all of them, I'm not saying we're all good, and not to say that I would not pick up that hat and do it again. One of the things that I got to do was, work in the media department at Occupy LA and start to take pictures and film and do interviews and, work on, and doing some live streaming and kind of covering, what I consider to be my own version of journalism as to what might be happening in the world and documenting it and putting it out there. But I started to think about what was the best way, what skill set do I have to offer? And now I'm getting ready to just take all of that, everything I'm becoming aware of and the experiences, and put it into Freedom of Joyce, of being, my new talk show, basically.
Right.
And then also put that into a stage act and a one-woman show. Because to me, one of the things that it's being eroded with us, or that is freedom, and especially in the United States. And I think in many ways, with all the bad things that we do, the original document, the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, the inspiration that was to the world, that we're not going to be, we are going to have a democracy. We're not going to be governed by, the aristocracy or the elite or the queen or the bloodline or anything like that. Right. And yet they still seeped through, and we're having what's happening now. But that essence is the kernel of the essence of all humanity. And so that I thought, well, now that's where I'm kind of focusing on, is to explore that subject matter in a comedic way. Is what I'm working towards now.
I'm really looking forward to that. And have you put anything out yet, or are we still writing and producing?
I'm still, I'm starting to put some stuff out. I have been, I've done some footage. One of the things that we're working on is, I'm working on a concept of this show called Trips. And, the Salt Lake City tours is part of that, where we live streamed our trip. And then we commented later on about our experience and our awareness of what that trip was, which would also combine, me doing a show and things like this. But yeah, I've been hitting the stage right now with beginning to develop that new act.
Nice.
So I'm working on getting booked as much as possible. And also right now it's in the works that we're going to be possibly doing a regular venue here in Vancouver, Washington of Freedom of Joyce, like bi-weekly.
Oh, nice.
And then I would start to live stream that show as well.
That'll be fantastic. Wait a second. You said Vancouver, Washington. So there's a Vancouver, Canada, and a Vancouver, Washington, huh?
Yes. And, I don't want to steal this because, like, a friend of mine, Ron Osborne, his joke is, I want to give him credit, but he calls it Vansterdam.
Ah, that's funny. That's cute. Very cute. Very cute.
Yeah.
Now, I just wanted to mention, I want to do a shout out to one of our dear friends, Miriam Delicato, who lives in the other Vancouver in Canada. So maybe there's some kind of like vortex with that name or something with like really cool people living there. Maybe
that's a nice way to think about it. I've been to Vancouver, Canada, so yeah.
Oh, cool. Very cool. Now, Tere, as we're moving to our last 15 minutes of the show, I can't believe this is happening. Oh, well, actually, it's about 25, but still, we're wrapping up. This has gone by so quickly.
Yeah.
I am personally interested in hearing about, you talked a little bit how you found one of our videos on our G.I.C. YouTube channel. How did you find us, and when did you decide to become a member of the Global Illumination Council?
Well, I found you, by YouTube, and I watched your video, and then I was like, I really like this man. And so I went through the whole entire series as you were uploading it.
Oh, wow.
And then, I think at first I was like, I Googled something like ascension symptoms, because I was feeling like I was going through like some physical changes. And then somehow I think I stumbled on one of your videos, and then I took the magical series, and then I just joined the G.I.C. And it was kind of like, because at first when I was like looking at all this stuff, I didn't want to like, I thought it would be like people that knew me normally. If I go, yeah, I'm a starseed, or, they would go, what? Have you lost your mind? You're weirdo now. I'd be like, well, I was always weird. I don't know what to say about that. And so I just thought, well, I'm going to come out a little bit and become a part of the community. And it was your, when you said something like, drugs are bad, or don't do drugs, or whatever, a little bit of beer and or something, you said something like, but marijuana is okay. And I was like, oh, okay. I feel like this is a place where I can hang in, and I'm not going to be discriminated for being behind this cause, because I have experienced quite a bit of, it's like if you say you support marijuana, you all of a sudden you have the scarlet A on your chest. You know, it's like you don't get hired for stuff. People like start to put you in a category. They think that you're dysfunctional and unreliable, and you're a drug addict, and all that negativity seems to like carry with you, and it carries with you in spiritual communities as well, even if they are not necessarily Christian or Orthodox.
Right. Let me just say to the public right now. Let me give you my motto when it comes to drugs. I'm not against drug use. My concern is drug abuse.
Yes.
Everything. The Buddha says the middle way. There's got to be a certain, I don't want to say control, but overdoing anything, whether it be food, drugs, beer, internet, comedy, drama, whatever, too much of anything is not good for you. And I believe we can all make our own personal decisions when it comes to that. And this is coming from someone who was an addict in their 20s. So I've learned moderation throughout my growth.
Yeah, I mean, there's a feeling of like, even when you go to Weight Watchers, it's like, well,
Never
there's
eat.
never nothing off the menu that you just give it to yourself. If you want a hamburger, just eat the hamburger. It's just don't eat 5 hamburgers.
Exactly. Exactly.
And being able to, control, because part of our growth is like to learn how to deal with substances and addictions and whatever those things might be or what they might symbolize to you.
And I feel, and to go into this discussion a little bit further is that we are all on our own journey. We are all on our own path. And for those that say, oh, marijuana is wrong for this path, or, cocaine is wrong for this path, whatever it is, it's wrong for you. And even if, a good example is my own personal journey of dealing with cocaine addiction in my 20s, that had to be a part of my experience for me to do and experience and know the world I know now. So I wouldn't be who I am if I didn't go through that journey. So to say that people are, you will not ascend, you're not going to become a good meditator, you're not going to become a great teacher, you're not going to become a clear-headed consciousness person because of your choices is not doing anybody any favors in my particular stance on this. I feel that, and not only that, if we look at hemp, let's talk about hemp for a moment.
Yeah.
We've seen, Dr. Rick's videos on curing cancer. We've seen hempcrete and how it can create, sustainable housing. We've seen fuel that can be created. We've seen foods, superfood, vitamins, just so much is available from just the plant of hemp alone, that we really need to start looking at it in a different perspective. And it's funny because when I started GIC, I was always a hemp activist. And I remember in the very beginning on MySpace, I remember telling people it's time to come out of the pot closet. Get out of the pot closet. We all know you smoke. Just smoke and tell everybody. We're not going to get anything done if we're going to make believe that we're not smoking it, because we're all, probably more than 50% of the population have smoked and are still smoking,
Oh yeah, I mean, I've performed in some of the most. I had one show where I guess the woman who booked it used my little cartoon character with the marijuana leaf on it, and put that as my promo. And the owner of the club got so mad that they actually put transposed another flower over it. And was just so offended by it. And yet, when I talked about it on stage, I looked down. I go, I smell weed, and one of the people from the audience left me a big old fat joint for me.
That's funny.
And I was like, wow. So there are benefits to telling the story. You do get extra gifts. I would like them to buy my DVD, but if you want to give me a joint, that's fine.
That's brilliant. So let me just share with everybody how happy I am that you've agreed to join our administration team at the Global Illumination Council, and I know you have plans on sharing some of your material and whatnot. So what are some of the materials that people could be looking forward to now that you're working with us as an administrator?
Well, I definitely would like to start to blog, to write some of the observations or life experiences I'm having as I'm having revelations. That would be part of also my Freedom of Joyce blog that I'm doing, and be able to show some of the videos and hybrid some of that to the G.I.Cs or to the justBernard blog. That's now new.
Yeah.
And I would like to start contributing to that as well. And I one thing that I like about the G.I.C. That I'm really happy about is there's so much information out there. And there's also a support in a community that understands it, which you don't normally find sometimes for a lot of people. I know, when I was going through and I'm still going through a shift of realizing things and learning things. There's so much to learn that to bring what you might have, you're right. I can write or do a show or to show comedy or whatever, to add this other aspect to it. It's exciting for me to think about contributing that way in a forum that I have not. It would be my first time starting to do something like that. But honestly, I have to say I've been thinking about it for a while, and so I'm really excited to take that leap into what the G.I.C. is about and has to offer, and the information that's out there.
Well, we're very excited to have you on board. I'll tell you. As I said, you've always been very supportive. As a matter of fact, you were part of our conference and fundraiser last year, and you're going to be a part of it again this year.
Yeah,
we're going to talk about the details of it after the show, actually. But last year, I don't know if anybody was able to watch it who might be listening, but we showed some clips of Tere, and then of course it was Roxy Lopez who interviewed you during the fundraiser, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it was Roxy.
Cool, very cool, and so it's such a great, what a great way to interconnect communities and whatnot. Here we are. I'm a host on Revolution Radio. Roxy's a host on Revolution Radio, and she's also a very big supporter of my work, and of course, having her to interview you was so exciting for me. I think that was the first time you guys actually met.
We did, and and through Facebook, I've stayed connected, and I'm actually going to be on her show on The Truth Denied on October 4th.
Wow, fantastic!
So, I'm excited. I'm excited to do that as well. And I've been really listening to her show, and I really like it. She's had some really great guests and really informative. As a matter of fact, had I not really listened to your shows and her shows and everything, I would not have gone into the Salt Lake City experience with the same perspective.
I'm sure. So, Tere, as we begin to wrap up, let's tell our listeners a little bit about where they can find you, some of your past work, and where they can find some of your future work.
Well, I have a blog that's at HollywoodHemptressHour.com. I also have I'm still doing I will still be doing media for cannabis legalization, although I am expanding to a larger platform, so you can check me out. Also, I have my Facebook page is facebook.com / Hollywood Hemptress Buzz. That's my Facebook page. I also have another Facebook page, facebook.com Freedom of Joyce 777 is my Facebook page. I am currently working on my new blog, which will be freedom/of/Joyce.com. And that will be my new blog site that will be coming out. I also have a YouTube channel. It's youtube.com / Hollywood Hemptress. I'm on Twitter at twitter.com Hollywood Hemptress, and also twitter.com Tere Joyce. And I also have a Ustream channel, both Hollywood Hemptress, The Hollywood Hemptress, and Freedom of Joyce. I have those Ustream channels as well. So you can like me, Facebook me, follow me on Twitter. And I do post my media through those channels. Or
you can just Google Tere Joyce and find all of these. Absolutely. That's fantastic. That's great. And as far as people on the ground, are you going to be doing any live shows in the Northwest?
Yes, I actually have a show on the 20th this month in Vancouver, Washington. It's actually, gosh, I need to look at the actual location for it, but I'm going to be posting it up on Facebook pretty soon. I'm actually working. It's a marijuana themed show. A guy named Reverend Junior High, but also Mark Price, who played Skippy on Family Ties.
Oh wow!
Yeah. He's on a marijuana-themed show. I think that's very interesting. Right. I have not met him yet, so it will be my first time meeting him. And so that's happening this week locally here in Vancouver. On the 28th, I'll be headlining in Seattle, Washington at Dave's in Milton. It's a bar restaurant.
Nice.
Yeah.
Very cool. So then they can see you live and they can see you online with all the information we just gave them. And again, just Google Terry Joyce or find her on her Facebook page, facebook.com/Freedom of Joyce 777.
Yes.
Okay, very cool, very cool. So it's fair to say, as we begin to wrap up, that as your career is moving forward and as you are moving forward on your particular journey, your particular path, that many of us will begin to see new material coming into what you're aligning with.
Yes. Yeah. I've been, testing it out. I mean, there's some places that, like, let's say there's some places that are more conservative or they're not really ready to hear certain things. So sometimes I adjust to see how much of a concept I can get through. As well as, just letting it rip. I think what I'm really happy about is to do it here in the Northwest as I really am, because I feel like this particular area I feel really embraced, and I'm actually working out of the country.
Nice.
I like to do a global tour and perhaps submit myself for the Edinburgh Festival. In Scotland, and I'm also looking into doing a comedy tour in India at the moment as well.
Oh, that would be great.
There's a big circuit happening out there right now, and
apparently so.
Yeah. So
well, that would be fantastic. I would love the folks from Normal to contact you and get you to do the Cannabis Cup.
I would too. I mean, there's been a couple of times, and they haven't really contacted. I mean, there was one time I was contacted to do something in Northern California, and that one didn't come out. I have gotten to know some of the hemp stock people or the cannabis people here in Oregon more heavily. And since the legalization aspect has happened in Washington, like, for instance, the Reverend Junior High show, that is, I've been put on that basically because of like everything all kind of coming together. So I think eventually as we expand with Colorado and legalization and things keep flowing, that I will definitely get more in that circuit comedically.
Wonderful.
Funny though, I'm not like I haven't been one of the main comedians that they do hire for those things, but I am starting to break in a little bit.
You will be.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're out of time. I can't believe this 2 hours has gone by so quickly. Thank you so much, Terry Joyce. Again, everybody, Google Terry Joyce. You'll find her all over the web. We will be back next week with Kathy Bilski, and I'm sure we're going to enjoy those 2 hours as well. And you can find me at thegic.org. Have a great week, everyone. We love you. Bye-bye.